years with Tourette's, and I hope everybody here learns something they can take away with them.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here with you also. Thank you for showing up.
So Indi, why don't you tell us what we're seeing here in some of these pictures?
Yeah, so these are some examples of Otto and I and what we do for work. So the one on the picture on the left is me in a green dress standing in front of the TAA sign. This was actually TicCon Dallas, which was my first Tic convention, and I had so much fun. And Otto was just amazing. The photo of Otto on my lap is sitting in the chair is also at TicCon Dallas, and that was at the booth that we worked. The third picture that's at the bottom there, that is me laying down on a chiropractor bench, and Otto is on top of me. He's actually doing one of his tasks, which is called deep pressure therapy, which I'm going to discuss more later, but that's an example of how he can help me. And then the picture on the right is just him working at normal. We're actually just at the grocery store, and Otto loves cheese, and that's him working around distractions such as the cheese counter. So that's kind of an overview of our lives.
Thank you. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you a little bit of background about service dogs and service dogs versus emotional support animals. We're going to talk a lot about what a service dog can do for someone with a tic disorder and show you videos of examples of Indi training with Otto and Otto working for Indi. We'll go in and talk about some general considerations, some pros and cons of service dog training and having a service dog. I'll talk through different ways of getting a service dog and a little bit about Atlas as an example of one of those ways. We're going to try to leave a good amount of time for Q&A at the end. But I know that when you get the link for this video, it will also include information about how to follow up with us for additional questions. So with that, what is a service dog? So this is all applying to US law. In the US, a service dog is defined under the American with Disabilities Act as a dog trained to perform at least one task to mitigate that person's disability. And disability under the American with Disabilities Act is really in the eye of the person. It's something that you find impacts your life significantly day to day. It impacts some major function of life. If you feel that you have a disability that impacts your life, if you have a dog who's been trained to mitigate at least one task and they're well behaved in public, then you have rights to bring them to all public locations, with the exceptions of some places that have like churches or some schools or places where it would change the nature of the business or be unsafe. The dogs can be any breed or mix of breeds. They can be any size. They can be trained by an organization, a specialized trainer, or the individual. And they can help people with a huge wide range of disabilities. So here we're going to be talking about tic disorders, but with the many co-occurring conditions that people have, they can do so many things around anxiety, chronic pain, migraines, autism, ADHD, and so much more. So it's just amazing. We're discovering more and more every day about what service dogs could do. And here we have a picture of a golden doodle with their paw on their handler's knees. So to give a little background about a service dog versus an emotional support animal, emotional support animals are different. In the US, the main reason to have a dog or an animal classified as an emotional support animal is for housing. It gives you, if you have a letter from your doctor, and that's one thing that's different from a service dog. When you're out in public with your service dog, you do not have to have documentation from a medical provider. You do not have to have documentation of the training. An emotional support animal, you do have to have documentation from your mental health provider that you can then give to whoever your landlord is. And then you could stay somewhere that doesn't allow dogs, or they could not charge you a pet fee. They are not specifically trained to perform any task. It's just their presence alone that is comforting. But they don't have the public rights that a service dog does. I also wanted to mention one side area that might be something for people to think about, which is a skilled companion dog, which is a dog who it helps you and has been trained to perform tasks, but doesn't necessarily have public access. So this could be great if, say, you have a dog who's already partially meeting your needs, but maybe they're really nervous in public settings. Maybe you don't need them as much out in public. This is what your dog that you have right now could help you, even if they wouldn't meet the criteria for a full public access service dog. And here we have a chocolate lab looking up across a gate. So just a little bit of background. There's a whole lot more that we could go into there. So Indy, why don't you tell us about Otto and in general what a service dog could do for someone with Tourette?
Yeah, so Otto has three main tasks that he does for me. That he does to mitigate the symptoms of my Tourette's and also my co-occurring conditions. And the first one is called deep pressure therapy. Oh, sorry, Otto's just come into the room now. Hello, baby. The first task is called deep pressure therapy, and it's basically Otto behaves like a weighted blanket. This can happen if I'm sat on the floor, sat on a chair, or laying down. Not really standing up, unfortunately, but in one of those three positions. And he basically gets on top of me, and he uses his body weight to calm me down. I like to use this if I'm having a tic attack, or if my tics are just getting to a point that I'm finding it hard to control or do my CBIT strategies for. And he just kind of helps me recenter myself. He gives me something to focus on, and his weight really actually slows my tics and stops them. Apparently this is because dogs, as they've like developed alongside humans, they've actually done studies that show that dogs have increased serotonin levels in humans, which helps calm our nervous systems, especially with us with Tourette's, and that can decrease the frequency of tics. So deep pressure therapy is something that I use a lot. The second task is called alerting. Now, an alert is basically a behavior and action that the dog does that they are specifically trained to do in the event of a medical thing, like, hey baby. For example, if I'm ticking, Otto will put his paw on my leg. That is his alert. And because sometimes I get stuck in my own head, and I find it hard to focus, or I forget to do my CBIT, him just bringing my attention to my tics and bringing my attention to him helps me refocus myself, lets me know that I'm ticking, and lets me know that I'm ticking enough that I should do CBIT and that I should start to calm myself down, or if necessary, do deep pressure therapy. The third task that Otto does is known as an interruption. It's instead of alerting me to a behavior, he is interrupting my behavior. So he is doing, an example of this would be if I'm cracking my knuckles. That's a really common tic of mine. And he will, if I'm in a position that he's able to reach me, he will put his head or his paw between my hands. So like if I'm cracking my knuckles like that, he can put his head between my hands and force my hands apart so that I can't crack my knuckles anymore. And I can also take over like stroking his head as a replacement behavior for my cracking my knuckles. And that helps just with frequency and alleviating pain, and works almost like a CBIT replacement strategy. And then there were two things that I wanted to talk about. So that's kind of what Otto does, like for me, like what he's trained to do. And then I wanted to talk about some training considerations for us with Tourette's, because as we all know, having Tourette's can be loud and can be violent and kind of scary sometimes. I mean, definitely for me. And I know like lots of other people experience that. And so when you have a dog who is with you all the time, who is trained in my case, and I think like with lots of people with Tourette's, it would be really helpful if they were trained to get into those behaviors and interrupt them or alert them. There are some tics that, like I have a punching tic that he doesn't deal with, he goes away. So you have to really focus on the safety of the animal. You know, he is a living being, and there are some tics that I don't want him dealing with. And, you know, this varies from every person. Our tics are very different. But if there are tics that an individual has that their dog should not be dealing with because of safety considerations, then that is something that you have to take into account. And then the second thing that I wanted to talk about was desensitization. As I just mentioned, tics are loud, tics are sudden movements, and they're unexpected, they're out of the ordinary. And a dog getting used to that. I mean, with owner training, Otto was brought up alongside my tics, so he was desensitized to them really, really quickly. But you know, if you have a dog that's a bit more jumpy, or if you're getting a dog that's not used to your tics, really working on the desensitization aspect before you can start working on the reacting to tics is really important, because otherwise they could develop a fear response to your tics.
Indy, do you want to talk about your diagram here?
Oh, yes. So that was the third thing. Sorry, I might be rambling a little bit too much. So I made this diagram to kind of visually explain something that I found really helpful, which is Otto's impact on me. And tics, especially my experience with my tics, is if I have too much of something or too little of something, like, or just too much stimulation, too little stimulation, too much sleep, too much exercise, too little food, whatever. Basically, there's only a very small area that I can exist in comfortably with my tics. I called that my Goldilocks zone. And that's basically where my tics are at a manageable level. But with Otto, he just extends that area. Having him by my side just increases the amount of space that I can exist in comfortably with my tics. I can deal with more stress and more things that could exacerbate my tics without getting to a point where my tics become unmanageable. So that's like an overview of his impact on me, just having him there as my service dog.
Thank you. And I think everybody heard Indi mention CBIT. Their family decided to go that route and not use medication. And it's amazing how complementary service dogs are for CBIT, with helping you recognize when you're ticking, helping you intervene, find an alternative replacement. That is exactly how they are trained. And so while they help with many conditions, it's amazing how complementary they are to that particular treatment. So next, let's take a look at some videos. So here we have a video of deep pressure therapy. Indi, why don't you tell me what we're watching here?
Yeah, so this is an example of Otto's first task, DPT or deep pressure therapy. I was in this situation, stressed with homework, my tics were getting bad, and I just kind of collapsed on the floor. And then Otto came over and he started doing his task, deep pressure therapy. And what he's doing here is he's just calming me down, calming my tics down, and just acting as like a blanket and a safety net to calm me down and calm my tics down to the point where I can get up and I can start and doing whatever it is I need to do again. So this is just an example of one of the many times that he has performed deep pressure therapy for me.
And deep pressure therapy is also really helpful to you for anxiety as well, right?
Oh, yes. So I have, as was mentioned at the beginning, I have anxiety and I have sensory issues related to my other diagnoses. And I get sensory overload quite often and panic attacks less, thankfully, but there's still an issue for me. And deep pressure therapy is really good with those as well. It calms me down, it lets me recenter myself, and it's just so wonderful to have him on me and that I can stroke him and focus on him in those situations.
And here we're going to look at some behavior interruption. What are we seeing here?
Okay, so I'm at school and I'm knuckle cracking, and this is an example of him interrupting my knuckle cracking tic with his paw and his head to stop me performing it. And so I'm cracking my knuckles and he puts his head and his paws in between my hands, so I can't crack my knuckles again. And then I can stroke his head, and then he does it again when I start to crack my knuckles again. And this just really like stopped that tic and really helps like mitigate pain from that.
And this is a training example, really neat kind of thing of looking at training to alert to tics and what to alert or what to not alert to. Indi, why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, so I am quite a, let's go with vibrant person. I'm very energetic, and I do lots of weird things. And unfortunately, a lot of those weird things can look like my tics. So this was in training, teaching Otto how to interact with my tics and how to notice what are my tics and what is not a tic. This is me dancing, this is not a tic, but then I start ticking and now he has to alert to me that I'm ticking. We have to teach him what is a tic and what is not a tic.
And then here, why don't you talk about the training process and some of the things that we have to make sure they can work around?
Yeah, so Otto, as some background, is a very big fan of playing with balls. He really likes them. And we have to teach him how to task around distractions when he might be interested in something else, but he really just has to work on duration, because this is a form of deep pressure therapy. And a deep pressure therapy that only lasts 2 seconds because there's a distraction around isn't very helpful. So this is him remaining in that position, even though there's that distraction of the ball in the background.
And then let's talk about here some more training for persistence. What are we seeing here with Otto and you at the dining room table?
Okay, so this is a combination of all of the tasks that he performs for me. I'm ticking, I'm sat down, but I tend to get stuck in my head, as I mentioned, and I feel like for us with Tourette's, you know, we don't really want to know that we're about to have really big tics. I feel like that's really common with lots of disabilities, and so I can be prone to ignoring him if he's telling me something because I'm busy in that moment or I'm hyper focusing. And so teaching that persistence where I'm doing something else and he first of all he alerts me and then he interrupts my tics and then eventually he alerts me again and I move and he performs deep pressure therapy. This was I was purposefully ignoring him in this situation to teach this, but this is also something that's very important in my day-to-day life where I might not be thinking about it and he has to alert me multiple times, and teaching that persistence is really important.
So I think this is a good time to talk about something that people don't necessarily realize is a part of the training process, which is kind of the mental challenge of having to be happy and reinforce your dog when they're letting you know you're doing something that is painful or that you don't want to do. So Indy, what do you think were some of the benefits of owner training and what do you think were some of the hard parts?
I'm always a big fan of ending with the positives, so I start with the negatives. So some of the cons were something that I really struggled with was the code switching. Like I would have to be so happy when I had just like forced myself to the brink of a tic attack. And then I would have to be so joyous and gleeful and force my tics back down again to reward him when he performed his task correctly in training. And this is happening multiple times in a row. And that was something, that mental and physical challenge of going from one extreme to the other when one extreme is somewhere that you really don't want to be can be really hard. And just the big tics was just like you're allowing yourself to do something that is really not great and that you really don't want to be doing. So that was definitely something that I found really challenging, and I had to take lots of breaks during these training sessions. Luckily, my trainer is amazing and she was more than happy to accommodate that. But there's just so many pros that it kind of like that's not even in the long run, that's not even necessary to think about because I've learned so many valuable training skills that allow me to adapt his behaviors over time as my tics develop. Because, you know, with tics, we get new tics, we lose old tics. Sometimes tics are more frequent, sometimes they're not. And so as I get new tics or as tics kind of drop off, I can teach him what behaviors to look for that are new and what behaviors to ignore as we're going along that he might used to have paid attention to. And that is just really important for especially us with such an adaptive diagnosis of Tourette's. It's never constant. And so that ability to train him myself has become really important and a big part of my life. And then it's also bonding with Otto. I mean, I loved the training sessions, I loved my trainer, but I loved working with him and getting to see his personality and kind of figuring out like how we were going to work together in the long run. And last thing, it's just fun. I mean, I love doing it. It was so much fun. I had such a great time training him, and it was something that I really like looked forward to and enjoyed doing. So those were all my happy things.
And we'll talk a little bit later about different approaches for training, but obviously that's something that is unique to owner training, to that kind of building your level of skill like that and having that level of duration with the dog. And what Indy talked about here with that mental challenge and kind of emotional challenge of going from doing this thing that's getting alerted to having to be happy, that's true of pretty much any medical alert dog. And so that's something that a lot of people don't realize they're going to be facing. And so it's just important to know. So thanks for that description, Indy. So let's kind of step back a little and talk about considerations of a service dog. We've heard a lot from Indy about some of the benefits and some of the challenges. I want to step back now and ask Victoria, what about some of your perspective from the rest of the family? Tell me about the impact of your entire family on having a service dog and the decision-making process of getting it.
Yeah, I think that was a really difficult decision actually for us. It was one that we didn't take lightly. We both work full time. And I had never owned a dog before. So not just having, training a pet dog, but then suddenly going to this level of service dog training. It was a little bit scary and overwhelming. But I think something that has been amazing for Indy and I, it's been that we have been able to spend so much time together as we've been going to all the classes together over his life so far. And that's just been a really fun way of us hanging out together. But in terms of lifestyle, we're a pretty outdoorsy family. We mountain bike, we ski, and that has meant that although we can take Otto and take him into hotels that are not pet friendly, you don't get to leave your dog in those hotels. And so, usually one of us, typically me, is hanging back at home, right? Because I want Indy to still be doing the sports and activities she loves. And so, that has been a change for us. We live just outside Seattle, so walking him before work, rain or shine, and usually rain near Seattle, right? But that's also brought about a really nice way to start my day. Getting out and seeing nature and the change of seasons has actually been something that I really, really enjoy. So I really loved that. There's obviously a financial cost involved, with having a service dog. But all of these things have just been, so easy really for us to modify our lives to, because every single day we were just seeing from when he was tiny the impact of his presence even before he was training on Indy's tics. And so as his training has developed and their bond has grown, we see exponential ability for him to calm her tics down, which means that she can access her education so much easier, and she's in the classroom so much more often than she was.
And talk about also, how did you involve your son with this, right? This was kind of a whole family effort of getting everybody on board and helping.
Yeah, it certainly has been a whole family effort. So our son has enjoyed a lot of rough and tumble, as my husband as well. They're both the ones who are, always up for a good play and tug of war. But my son takes Otto out for his last wee of the day. So he's been charged, at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night with taking him out into the street to have a wee. And so I think just everybody having their place and knowing that Otto was primarily Indy's service dog, that's why we got him. But when he's at home and he's not like with his jacket on working, he gets to be a family dog, and he code switches really well. The rest of the family, not quite so much, but he certainly knows. And even when he's at home, he's always got one eye on her, even if he's asleep, and he's checking, do I need to do anything? Am I needed? All right, I'll watch for a little bit, but it's lovely to see everybody else being able to interact with him.
Tell me a little bit more. So I'll start with Victoria, then Indy, I'll ask you the same question. Tell me a bit more about the pluses and minuses of just the visibility of having a service dog with you when you have a disability.
Yeah, I'm sure that everybody with Tourette's has probably been out in public at some point and unfortunately faced a member of the public, young or old, being incredibly rude and hurtful. Certainly, I've witnessed Indy have to go through that on numerous occasions. And that's really, really hard. And Indy, before Otto, would almost go out into the world with carrying that little fear on her shoulder, that she would always be a little bit worried about what if somebody said something again. And so when we go out with Otto, I really see Indy drop that fear, right? Because she knows that here she is, she's showing up in the world with Otto in front of her, and he's wearing his jacket that says, there's something that's, I'm not just everybody else, I'm a little bit special. And, you know, if I act in a way that is not the typical norm, then here is my service dog, and you can direct your attention here, right? And while that shouldn't necessarily be something that's happening, I definitely see for Indy that having him helps her relax in public. You know, and everyone is obsessed with Otto because he's super cute and floofy. And, you know, so the attention is off her, and she can kind of tick more in private, even if when she's out, than when it was just her.
Indy, tell me a little bit about, thank you, Victoria. And I know I love to hear you say you describe Otto as Indy's armor. And Indy, tell me a little bit about your experience with this visibility, especially at school.
Yeah, so I think that the main thing that I have noticed since having Otto about, you know, at school or members of the public's comments towards me, because if anything, I've become more visible, you know, but the comments about Otto as I get a lot less comments about my tics because they don't even notice them because Otto, right? And the comments about Otto, even if they are being way beyond the boundaries of what they should do, are a lot less mean. They come a lot less from a place of hatred and aggression. And they're a lot more about like, oh, there's a dog, or oh my God, there's a dog, you know? And I think that having Otto has really, like, the comments are now the less of a fear and more of an annoyance that had just become a fact of life. There's no way to avoid them, but they're a lot easier to deal with, especially because, you know, us with Tourette's, it's such a little known disability and it's so misrepresented that, you know, if you explain to someone, oh, I've got Tourette's, they're either likely to make fun of you more or make you explain your entire life history and trauma, right? And your diagnosis, because they just have no clue. So having Otto and having, the great thing is he's federally protected. I have the ADA that says, you know, there's an assistance dog you cannot pet, you cannot interact with, you cannot discriminate against. And I can literally, I have cards that say the law on them that I can hand to people and be like, actually what you're doing is illegal, which makes me feel a lot more comfortable in responding to some of the meanness that I get about Otto than I get about Tourette's, because can you stop, you're hurting my feelings is a lot less strong than can you stop, I could sue you. You know, I don't say that, but I could. And so I have that confidence that I'm a lot better able to defend myself in those situations. And yeah, so that's basically it about like the whole comments in public that I get.
And I think this is something that a lot of people with invisible disabilities or sometimes invisible disabilities really feels like, hey, the dog lets the world know there's something else going on with me. Victoria, let's talk about integrating into school. What's some advice that you would give other parents about, and then Indy, I'm going to ask you the same question about advice you'd give other students, but Victoria, what's some advice you'd give other parents about integrating a service dog into school?
Yeah, I think we got to the point where Indy was being you know, asked to leave in her last year of elementary school and removed from the classroom because she was being disruptive. And then in middle school, it became that she was more in the nurse's office because one of her tics was hitting her head, right? And then they would send her home. And so she was just missing so much school. So when we first broached the idea of getting a service dog to middle school, she was in year 8. And actually her counselor and principal were so supportive. And through them, they worked out the kind of wording that would be most acceptable to the district when they put this as a thing for her 504. And so they called Otto a medical device. And now not everybody loves that term, but for them, they were just trying to find, okay, how can we maximize the leverage to get him into school? And so when he was 6 months old, so not fully trained at all, but in his last couple of weeks of middle school, he actually started on a very small schedule going into school with her, so that when she went to high school, he could start full time. And I think that probably getting him written onto her 504 has been the best thing ever, right? That's not to say that we don't still have challenges. You know, Indy has to be really careful about picking the right PE class so that he's safe and maybe he can enjoy it as well, right? So they've done hiking and things. But trying to get as much advice from the TAA, who have an amazing education department. I would say that's something that's really valuable. And then knowing that you can ask for anything on a 504. Doesn't mean that it'll be granted, but you can ask for it. So just that piece of advice was really useful to then how we integrated him. And, you know, he now goes to chemistry, biology class. He's got booties and goggles, and that's how he shows up in school.
Thank you. Indy, let's hear from you a little bit, advice you'd give other students going in, especially about having to like get comfortable self-advocating and just kind of the visibility and what this has been like. What's some advice you would give other service dog handlers, especially students?
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit squidged because I know we're short on time, but so I've got a couple of points I want to make. The first is you do not have to bring your dog to school. I choose to because of the benefit that he makes, but you know, you could bring him elsewhere in your life and not to school. Or you could bring them sometimes to school if you're having a bad day, or you could just choose to leave them at home, like for school dances. I don't bring Otto. I get a lot of questions about that from other classmates, but you know what, that's what works for us. So it does not make you less of a service dog handler or make you less needing of them if you just, that's just a place that you decide not to bring your dog, you know? And another thing is that it's a really good idea, like as my mum mentioned, to get people on your side. You know, you're not everyone, and I have felt like this at so many points in my life, but not everyone is out to like get you or judge you or actively wants you to fail, which is something that I've struggled with believing and stuff. But you know, like my friends help me so much with managing Otto, and I have teachers that have my back, especially in middle school, like mum mentioned. And just having like members of staff that you can rely on and building that network of support is really important. And then the other things are having to self-advocate constantly, and like in a decision to bring your dog to school, this is something that you want to consider. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I get harassed, I get barked at, I get yelled at, but for me, those are just things that I've learned to deal with, and compared to the harassment I would get from my tics, this is just so much more preferable, and the benefits that I get from Otto, having him there, I just, like, I don't even take into consideration, like, are just so beyond the negatives that the reward is so much worse, is just so much worth it that I can't even, but you know, that might not be something for everyone else. Like the area I live in, the people I go to school with, really influenced my decision on bringing him. But there have been times when I've had to explain to teachers or members of staff that no, you can't touch my dog. No, then you have to be really firm with people that are in a position of authority, which is something that took me a really long time to learn. And a lot of times you do get some backlash for that. So I think that is something that to take into consideration. Like where I'm at now, I've had to really learn how to advocate for myself. And so that's some advice that I would give you, just really learning that skill.
Thank you.
If I can just quickly jump in, I just wanted to, leave some time for Q&A. So thank you so much, Victoria, Indi, and Jennifer, for that wonderful preliminary discussion. So before we hop on to Q&A, I just wanted to remind everyone that my colleague Alexandra, she's going to be dropping a QR code, or sharing, I should say. She'll share a QR code up, and that's the survey that we'd like for you to answer in response to tonight's programming. So if you just quickly snap it on your phone, take a quick couple of minutes, and then while you're answering the questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Molly so she can.
We're actually not quite ready for Q&A yet. There's still a bit more of the presentation.
Oh, okay. No problem. So I just wanted to make sure that was up so people can access that before the session ends. All right.
Sure.
Thank you so much. All right.
Can I go back to sharing?
Yes, I think we'll give it a couple more seconds, and then Alexander's going to drop the link into the chat as well for everyone.
Okay.
Yep.
So while this is up, I wanted to sort of circle back to some of the conversation we've had, and kind of a reminder that a service dog isn't a cure-all. They're an adjunctive therapy. They're an animal. And so you are ultimately responsible for their care, and you're also responsible for your care. And so just remembering that they're there, they help mitigate these symptoms, but they're not a cure. And so just taking that into account. And then with that, it looks like you've hopefully put that in there. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing again and talk through a bit about options. And I'm going to consolidate this pretty quickly so we can get to Q&A. So there's three primary ways of getting a service dog. One is working with typically a nonprofit organization who provides an already trained dog. Benefits of this: the dog is typically trained to a fairly high level, but that can vary. They may be free if you qualify, and they may be internationally recognized, which can make travel easier. However, to our knowledge, there are no known service dog organizations that train dogs specifically for Tourette's. They may train them for related conditions and then support someone with Tourette's, but that is not their primary. There's a potential for a very long wait list. This can be 3 years, 5 years, or more. And you have to meet very specific criteria, and the quality of the ongoing support and training really can vary. And this also can have a very high cost. Second would be purchasing a started or already trained dog. So this could be going and working with a breeder who then has an initial training program that takes them to a certain point. It could be working with a private trainer who is selling these dogs. You may get additional ongoing support from that, and you may have fewer criteria to qualify. But again, there still could be a long wait list. There's a big shortage of service dog trainers or people that are doing started dogs. This often can be extremely expensive, $20,000, $30,000 or more. There's no guarantee they're going to be a good match, and typically there's no ongoing support. And be extremely careful of potential scams. There have been so many cases, especially of people preying on parents of children, where the parents are desperate to find support for their child. And they spend $20,000 to buy a dog. The dog gets shipped to them, and the dog either doesn't have sufficient training. The dog might bite the child. They return them back, and then the agency just shells them again to the next person. So there are really ethical, good trainers out there, but there are also people just taking advantage. So be careful with this. The third option, this is what we as Atlas do, is owner training. You already have a dog, or you adopt or purchase a dog, and you train them on your own with support. You heard Indi talk a lot about some of the benefits of getting to choose your dog, building the bond, really knowing how to modify the training as you go. This often can be less expensive. Drawbacks, though: you're bringing a dog into your home and hoping it's going to work out. You don't know that they're going to develop the temperament necessary to be a service dog. It can be a big learning curve for people that have never had a dog. And it can be hard to find support and a qualified trainer to help you. So this is where one of our programs comes in, and you can follow up with emailing us at info@atlasdog. I'm just going to briefly give you an example of an owner trainer program with us. Your dog needs to be at least 14 months old with basic foundations of temperaments and obedience. And then we work with people hands-on for 9 months. We are a national organization, but we support people where we have our trained volunteers. And we help you learn the disability tasks, public access, self-advocacy, and really real-life skills wherever you're going to be, and then provide continued ongoing support. Another program that we offer that might be something for people to consider, and there's other ones similar to this, is our online Team Set in Motion program. This is designed, it's completely online. It's designed for somebody who may not be ready for the service dog program, or maybe you don't want to go all the way to training a service dog. This is a starting point to help get you ready. This can be great for any pet dog owner. So this kind of online education can really be a great starting point to getting prepared for a service dog. So with that, we're going to jump into Q&A. We're accessible at info@atlasdog.org. And I know that there will be a follow-up email that comes out that has more information. So Molly, take it away.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions. I tried to answer a few in the chat that I was able to. So a few extras that came in. So Jen, this will be a good question for you. So what happens if the dog doesn't do well in training and you're doing owner training? And kind of follow up, how do you select a good dog to train? Big question.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. That's one of the hardest questions. So and I'm going to keep this fairly condensed. So in terms of looking for a dog, and we have a lot of info on our website, but there's a lot of things to consider, like your lifestyle, your activity level, what you need the dog to do, where they're going to go. Do you need a dog big enough to help support with mobility and bracing? Do you need a dog that, you're probably going to want a dog that's fairly attentive and in tune to you and looking at alerts and interruptions, a dog that likes physical contact. So it's looking for really good options as breeders. There's breeders out there that like to really specialize in service dog training and are willing to give priority of their litters to people that are doing service dog work. And then as you're going through training, it's constantly looking at the dog, in our case as a trainer, and looking at the team and saying, how is it going? Is the dog showing me that they're really not enjoying this? Is the person showing me that the stress of doing the training is just so hard that it may not be the right choice for them to be an owner trainer? Is it that caring for the dog is so much effort that it could be causing more harm to them than the benefit they get? And so it's looking along the way, assessing and being honest with yourself for your sake and the sake of the dog, especially of, hey, this dog is telling me this is really not what they want. And then recognizing you may need to rehome them if you can't support having a second dog and you really need a service dog. It may be you keep them as a pet and you start again with another dog. So it's a tricky process.
Okay. Then Indy, this is a question for you. Can you speak to how Otto has helped with your FND?
Yeah, so I get FND paralysis, sometimes full body, but most commonly in my legs and also nonverbal. Basically parts of my body will freeze and I call it getting stuck. And Otto, I didn't train him to do this. He has mostly just recognized it. But there are times when I will get stuck and he will come over and he will nudge me until I can like start moving again, which I didn't train him. That's just something that he picked up on, which is actually quite common with varying service dogs for different medical conditions. They will learn to do things by themselves, and that was one of my things. But if you've got seizure dogs, if you've got seizure because of FND, you can do seizure alert, and there's just lots of different things that you can do. And I know FND tics, so a lot like similar to the tic interruptions that I talked about, because some of my tics are FND. Just doing all of that, like it's very personalized to you, but those are the ways that he's helped me.
And then we have a question. So having trouble finding reputable trainers and or finding a place to learn how to train, there seems to be so much conflicting info on how to get started for my child.
And this is really a lot of why we started Atlas, was to make this kind of owner training support available. And we actually started a full academy for professional trainers to learn how to do service dog training because there is such a shortage. So I definitely say come check out our site and our resources. We'll let you know if we have support where you are, and otherwise we'll help you try to find some other resources in your area to make sure that you have the support you need. This is not something that you really don't want to do this alone. It really helps to have that community and support.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna sing Atlas's praises here for a moment. I loved working with them. Jen and Molly both were amazing, and I was so grateful for the support that they've offered me. And they still do ongoing things. So, I had no idea what I was doing. I trained him mostly in puppy classes and obedience before I met Atlas, but they really walked me through how to make him be a service dog. And so, I really recommend it. It was just amazing. And the trainer that they connected me with, Sagako, love her so much. She was amazing.
Thank you. Indy, we have another question for you. So Liz says, my daughter has lots of physical tics and some can be quite aggressive. So Indy, have you ever faced a situation with aggressive tics where you unintentionally hurt Otto? How are you able to mitigate that if he's close to you during a tic attack?
Okay. Thankfully not yet. I have not experienced me hurting Otto because of a tic yet. If I am having violent tics, like I will punch things. And he's so in the pictures, he's a medium-sized dog, but he's quite short. So he only comes up to about my knee. So my violent tics tend to be punching and hitting things and my body like going like that. So if I am being violent, then if I'm standing or sitting in a chair, I can kind of keep him away and I can just do deep pressure therapy. Or I could keep him far away from me and that helps as well, but also relying on other people. So like I have some friends who will, if I require it, will take my lead in school so that Otto is not near me, or if I'm at home, my mum mitigates that.
And I would just add in there, like when Indy has had a really violent tic attack here at home, he has looked at me with a, okay, this is above my pay grade,
Yeah.
and gone and sat down.
Yeah, he is.
So
He
it's
knows
amazing how he knows.
And that's
if-
something that you can specifically train and that we do specifically train of, oh, you see this behavior, back away.
Yeah. And you know, if your tics are bigger, I mean, Jen, but maybe getting a bigger dog just so chance of injury isn't that bad, or is lower, you know, risk. Like Otto is quite small, I could hurt him quite easily. So, you know, but my violent tics are few and far between. If you, at least now I've got him. So maybe like a bigger dog would be better in that instance.
Yeah, it's really individual. And I really appreciate the focus on safety. Because it is really
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah, especially with Tourette's. Thank you for asking that question.
Indy, you touched on this a bit, but maybe there's kind of a follow-up question. How does having a service dog impact a person's ability to participate in activities, for example, a chorus group or gymnastics?
Okay, so so I'm going to give my own personal experience with this. As for, you said chorus group, I'm actually joining choir next year for the first time. Otto doesn't really like music, so if that doesn't work, I might need to find somewhere else to go. But that is something, if that's in school, then maybe finding a separate location for Otto, like the teacher's office or something. Well, I say Otto, your dog. But then like if that's an outside of school activity, maybe, you know, not bringing your dog, you could always choose to do that. I did MMA, so I didn't do gymnastics, but I used to do martial arts. And he would remain in place, which is a skill that they teach service dogs, which is basically an extended lay down wait. And he would just do that. And if you're worried about safety, you can tie them. And then that way you can, if you need to use a task, you can go over to your dog instead of your dog being free to run around, right? But that's how I would approach it. But you know, your situation might be different. So it's just thinking about logistics. And a lot of places you can work with them to like discuss with employees on how to best accommodate your dog. They don't have a right to refuse you. So, I mean, unless it's a church choir, but.
And we've had other clients that are in marching bands, and kind of work with the dog being with them and when is the dog with them or not, desensitizing them. So yeah, it's lots of options.
We just had a client go rock climbing with her dog. So I'm a pediatric movement disorders nurse practitioner and would love advice on how to offer this as an option for some of my patients and their families. I'd recommend probably following up in an email with us so we can send out some resources.
And you could always just, I mean, the reason my parents were convinced is because my CBIT therapist said that, you know, I think this would be really helpful for you. So even just bringing up the idea, they might not have thought about it. That can also just help, like just say, hey, have you thought about service dogs?
Let's see, trying to go through a lot of questions. Are there certain breeds that we would recommend for service work?
Jen, I'm gonna let you take that one.
Yeah, I was answering some of the questions. So it really is going to depend on your lifestyle and what you need the dog to do. So a Chihuahua can be a perfectly reasonable service dog if, you just need, if you want some small retrieval items, if you want medical alerts. They're not going to be doing deep pressure therapy though. They're not going to be supporting you or bracing you if you're off, if you're stumbling or off balance or anything like that. A really big dog can be great for deep pressure therapy, but say you travel in airplanes a lot, that can be a lot to fit them in with you. Getting to know their life, like how active are you? How active is the dog? So really looking at different personality traits, temperament traits, size, that's something that I'd recommend. We do have a service dog selection course that's a little geared more toward trainers taking, but we also have resources up for questions to ask breeders and things to consider of a good fit of a service dog for you.
And also allergies, Otto's hypoallergenic because I'm
Yep,
allergic.
really good point.
Ooh, this is a great question. Indi, how do you explain to people, if you ever do, that if you only need Otto during certain times? Do you ever get questions on his necessity?
Maybe no one has outright asked what like a necessity, but definitely at school dances, I choose not to bring him. He's knee height. I wear stilettos. He could be quite easily stood on. And that he doesn't like music, and that just kind of environment is not right for him or for me to bring him. That would just cause me more stress. So, and I definitely I'm in my second year of high school now. I've gone to quite a few dances, and people by now kind of, when they see me, they're like, oh, she doesn't have a dog. They expect that. There are still some people, especially in my first or second dance, that would come up to me like, where's Otto? Or, I just went to the dentist today and they were like, oh, where's Otto? But I think luckily for me, most of the experiences that I've had with questions like that are more casual curiosity and less like nastiness behind it. I mean, you totally could get that, but thankfully in my experience, those particular kinds of questions haven't been at from that perspective.
And that's such also just a great reminder that it's not because you have a service dog that you must bring your service dog everywhere with you. It's completely legitimate not to.
I was going to answer one live that someone was asking, do we have courses for people that want to be trainers as well as owners or want to train their existing? Absolutely. So we have a full academy for professional trainers who want to expand what they offer with service dog training, as well as individual offerings of that if you really want to focus on just one area, such as service dog selection or medical alert training. So go check that out on our site. We'll make sure that's included in the resources that come out.
And that includes for people that are international. I think I had seen there was someone who was from South Africa who was asking. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Let's see. How long approximately did it take to train Otto to do amazing work that he is doing? Thank you, Indi and Victoria, so much for sharing all this helpful information. My 19-year-old has Tourette's and tics, and really appreciate your input.
Well, thank you. So Otto is going to be 3 in November. And he graduated Atlas's program in March. So I got him at 8 weeks. We were doing training on the second day. I was teaching him to sit. And just that kind of, so it's continuous and really like the rate. Luckily I have a really good support network. And so my training went by quite a lot quicker than it could have done if I was by myself, because of the amount of recuperation I needed from training, like to teach him how to respond to tic attacks and stuff. So kind of, it really just depends on you. I like to think that my dog is very, very clever, and so he went by quite quickly. But it's just like there's no rush, and it's very personal. But for me, I would say it probably took about 2.5 years to get him to where he is now. But training's continuous. Like we're gonna go and do training sessions tomorrow out in public, and every day it's like working on new skills or refining older skills and just keeping him up to date with things.
But he was having an impact from, you know, a puppy, you know, almost from when he was in our house. That was changing how Indi's tick frequency was happening. So
Yeah, so just, yeah, that's my
I think we're supposed to wrap up now.
Thank you so much to our speakers tonight. What a wonderful discussion. And I saw all the engagement in the Q&A, and there's tons more questions here. I know we didn't get to all of them, but we will be sending out the questions to our presenters tonight so they can answer and then send it back in an email. So don't fret. But I really wanted to just let everyone know as a reminder, again, please complete our survey linked out in the chat and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within a few business days with a link to review tonight's recording as well. So it'll be up on our TAA YouTube channel. So on behalf of the TAA and all of our presenters tonight, thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all a really good evening. Thank you so much, Molly, Victoria, Indi, and Jennifer.
Thank you.
thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks
Yeah,
so
this means so
much.
much to me, so thank you all so much.
I'm gonna stop the recording.